All right, so we're going to go ahead and start our demo of how to draw value in your sketchbooks for the beginner's drawing project. So you have your handout and you have a cylinder, a sphere, and a rectangle. The rectangle is the first one I want you to start with. It's a little bit easier. We're going to take baby steps with this entire project, so it's important that we just start with a basic shape and work our way up. You'll find, as with all of the demos we've had in this class, these are going to be the hardest ones you do. They seem very simple now, but you're learning how to draw, so it's very challenging. So if you struggle with these, don't feel like the rest of the project will feel this way. It'll get easier when you get more practice. Okay, so first things first, you're going to trace it in. If you have really thick sketchbook paper, your sketchbook paper, you may need to bring to one of the light boxes or a window and trace it in with the sunlight or with a light box. In my case, my paper was a little bit thick, so I went ahead and drew it already and traced it in a window. So I took my box and traced it, and again, this is what I'm going to attempt to do. Then what you're going to want to have in front of you is your graphite pencil, your kneaded eraser, right here, and then your blending stump. And all three of them are going to be used in equal parts throughout this project. So you want to get in the habit of using all three equally. So in this case, what I'm going to do, always, couple things first, have your sheet of paper under your hand at all times. It's so important that you have a sheet of paper under your hands. It doesn't seem like it, but you have a lot of hand oils on your hand. Those hand oils are going to affect your paper in different ways. Also, if you wear lotion, if you had lunch, you inherently are going to have oils on your skin that won't show up on the paper, but they will show up with the pencil, and especially when you go to use the blending stump. The blending stump will blend all of that oil into your paper, and you have to be very careful that doesn't happen. So always get in the habit of having a sheet of paper underneath you. Okay, so first things first, notice how my pencil's pretty dull. You can see that very flat end right there. That's the best way to work with larger areas to blend. That way you don't have a ton of pencil strokes showing. So let's start. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Notice how these are nice and thick. That's from that really dull pencil line. It's going to be a lot more challenging to blend them when they're super thin like that. So nice big thick strokes with the pencil on the paper. I'm going to build up my layers like so. And work my way slowly across the paper. I'm going to change directions every once in a while just to make it a little easier on myself. Notice how I'm not just going right across like this, I'm just going to rotate my pencil strokes. It's a lot like scratch art, and that you're gonna make kind of shapes. You don't want to go like this because those will start to build up and they won't look good after a while. I'll show you what I mean when we get into the lighter areas. It doesn't matter so much in the darker areas, but it does affect the lighter areas. I'm going to press in. I'm applying a pretty good amount of graphite into the paper. Notice where I'm holding the pencil, I'm not super uptight, just kind of about right here. And I'm going to slowly start to work my way across the paper. Now the catch is you don't want to go back and forth like this, because if you keep going, these edges are going to show through. These lines, like where you started and picked up, those will show. So you want to have nice, even marks. Lift up your pencil every time. If you get in the habit of doing this, it'll be just as easy as if you're going back and forth like this. Keep moving across, keeping my pencil strokes really close together. That's so important. Notice how here you can see they're kind of separated. I'm going to come in and kind of pull all those lines together very slowly. Now, of course, I make this look really simple. It's not going to come that naturally to you. The rectangle might take you 20 or 30 minutes to figure out. That's okay. Take your time. To hide, whenever you have something like this take place where you can see those pencil strokes, just come in, make it a little bit darker. You'll be able to smooth it out with the pencil strokes, or with the blending stump rather. This is where I traced and I kind of messed up, so I'm just going to use my kneaded eraser and erase that real quick. I'm just going to keep my pencil strokes nice and close together, nice and light. I'm barely touching the paper right now. Very, very lightly. Like so. Okay, now it's important to leave this area totally white, because if you don't leave it totally white, the blending stump's not going to work. You want to make sure that you're building up your layers slowly but surely. Okay? So leaving an area white will help because the blending stump is inherently going to be covered in graphite. And so if you're not careful, you'll lose all that white. And it's just like with the scratch art project where you're going to want some areas to stay totally white on your paper, just like you wanted to have some areas stay totally black on your scratch art. So here I'm going to show you guys how to use the blending stump. I'm looking at my value scale and I've got a pretty good transition from dark to light for the most part. I could probably go a little bit darker in an area like here, but you want it to be about this balanced is really good. So now I'm going to take my blending stump. Notice how it's angled. When you sharpen these, use sandpaper only. They don't go in the pencil sharpener. Don't use X-Acto knives. You're just going to take your sandpaper and carefully, when you need to, wipe it around the sandpaper to clean it up or sharpen it. You may notice that sometimes the blending stumps, they stop working, or they don't do as much value, and it doesn't look like I did much here, but it kind of ripped up. Basically, they're just rolled up pieces of paper. But when you kind of rough it up on the sandpaper, it makes all the difference. It'll clean up the particles and they'll spread more easily when you're working with them. So now let's go ahead and start. I'm going to hold it really low to the paper. So this part of the paper is touching the entire blending stump. Notice how I'm holding it. It's kind of just gripped in between my hand like so. It's not like I'm holding a regular pencil. This isn't how you normally use it unless you're working in really big areas that you need to blend, but this is how I'm going to hold it. Otherwise, you can just hold it like a regular pencil and blend like that. But it takes some getting used to, so if it doesn't come naturally, that's okay. The key is when you use the blending stump, this whole value is already indicated. It's tempting to think that the blending stump will do the value for you. The only thing the blending stump does is hide the tooth of the paper. The tooth of the paper is the texture that you can see here. So to hide the tooth of the paper and make it nice and smooth, like this box, you're going to use the blending stump. Okay, so make sure you have a really good amount of value on there. Sometimes I see students, they'll just do all this dark and they'll go all the way to here with dark and then expect the blending stump to blend it out, and that doesn't work. So that's really important to know now. Okay, so I'm going to hold it low. And slowly pull it across. You can hold it like a pencil if you need to kind of bring it in here. Make sure I always have paper under my hand. I want you to practice and make sure your edges are beautiful while you're working. Edges meaning this area right here. Same with the pencil, you're going to lift up every single time. Now I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Every single time you use the blending stump, lift up. I'll show you why in a couple minutes. In here, to kind of smooth these areas, you can kind of go in kind of a circular motion. Circular motions help. They come with a little bit of practice. I'm going to hold it like a regular pencil here. Press in that tooth, get that edge nice and even. I want you to make sure your edges are beautiful like this, or as close to as beautiful as possible, because that's how your drawing's going to be. You're going to have lots of edges in your drawing that you're going to want to make perfect. I'm going to kind of smooth that area in a little bit more now that I've got a little bit more on. Just keep working my way across. Now that I'm going into the lighter areas, just like with a pencil, I'm going to press more lightly. If you press too dark, you're going to basically ruin your entire value scale. So just like with the pencil, just shoo, shoo, kind of motions with your hand, nice and light. And then by the time you get to the lightest areas, you're basically just allowing your blending stump to grip the paper, barely applying pressure. And see how that spreads it across a little bit more than the pencil went. That's why you wanted to leave a little bit of that area white. Now for some students, you may find you need to do a couple of these value scales to get the hang of it, and that's totally okay. The key with the blending stump when you're working with it, the reason you want to lift up every single time is so that you have an even stroke like that, where it just goes perfectly from light to dark. If you're not careful and you go back like this, you're going to have these marks that will inherently be created. These little guys right here don't come off with any erasers. They kind of get stuck in the paper. So you want to be careful every single time. Lift up and move across like this every single time. And then you can always work in circles too, just kind of rotating circles like that. That's my preferred way to use the blending stump, is just little ovals. But you can go like this too, as long as you lift up every single time. Now, let's say you want a little bit too dark over here. You got kind of carried away with the blending stump. This is when the kneaded eraser will come in handy. Some of you will use the kneaded eraser more. I'm just going to kind of pinch it and bend it so it's nice and sharp like this, and kind of lay it flat on the paper. And I'm just going to carefully lift up a little bit and bring back some of that white, but then we have that kind of intense area right there. It's a lot of back and forth with the blending stump and the eraser. Just going to smooth that area out again. Okay, and there's my value scale. Again, most important thing, work light to dark, take your time. Always lift up with the pencil when you're working across. You don't want to go like this with the pencil. You want to lift up every single time you make a pencil stroke. Same with the blending stump, always pull it across gently. Both of these work with pressure, so you need to work darker, you're going to put more pressure on your paper. Lighter, you're going to put less pressure. This is the hardest part of the box, is making sure that looks great. So take your time with that. If you need to do 2 or 3, do 2 or 3. It doesn't take a long time and it's worth it in the long run. It'll make your life a lot easier as you move on to the next tutorial.